Guten Abend and Namaste everyone. I'm Ruby Jaspreet. I'm Consul from the Indian Consulate, and I welcome all of you today as we organize this special session to mark the International Women's Day. This year, the year 2021, we are also celebrating India's 75th year of independence. And as we celebrate India's 75 years of independence, we remember the role that Indian women had in our freedom struggle while also bringing about a lot of reforms in our country. These were cultural reforms, social reforms, educational reforms. So, to remember the role of Indian women in 75 years of India's independence on the occasion of Women's Day, we are organizing this panel discussion. I take this opportunity to welcome and introduce our panelists today. We have the great honor. We are joined by Professor Geeta Dharampal. She's joining from India. Professor Dharampal is a retired head from Department of History at the South Asia Institute in the University of Heidelberg. She is currently the Dean of Research at the Gandhi Research Foundation in Jalgaon. Professor Dharampal is an expert of cultural history and also an authority on Gandhian studies. So thank you, Professor Dharampal, for joining us today. We're also joined by our dear friend, Ms. Jagjit Anders, who we lovingly call Jags. Jagjit is an active member of the Indian community. She is a certified yoga teacher and also an English teacher in VHS schools. But most importantly, Jags is an enthusiastic proponent of Indian culture and has supported the Indian Consulate in many events in our jurisdiction. We are also joined by Ms. Manjari Kirloskar on my left. Manjari ji has studied child psychology in Pune. We've had the pleasure of having Manjari work with the Indian Consulate for 13 years before she left in 2019. Manjari is an active member of the Thai Women's Network also. We joined virtually by Ms. Malati Krishnaswamy. She's here with us. Malati is an entrepreneur, a motivational speaker, and a podcaster. Malati is a proponent of women's rights, and she runs a podcast where she focuses on women's successful role in various aspects of life. Finally, we have Ms. Rucha Ambekar on our far right. Rucha is the founder of Trans Compass, where she works in the field of intercultural communication. She has also previously worked as a lecturer for intercultural studies at the University of Kassel. So thank you everyone for coming today. As I was mentioning, we're looking at women's role in the freedom struggle and what all reforms they brought. So I will request Professor Dharampal to address us today. And Professor Dharampal, if you could also tell us about the role that Kasturba Gandhi played in India's freedom struggle while also bringing about reforms. Floor is yours, Professor Dharampal.
A real privilege for me to be participating in this very special Women's Day program being organized on and offline. And my sincere thanks to Dr. Amit Telang, the Indian Consul General in Frankfurt, for inviting me, and to Ms. Ruby Jaspreet for getting in touch with me and for organizing the whole event so efficiently and with such charm. I've been asked to speak about Kasturba Gandhi, and this is indeed an honor. And let me begin my remarks with a quote by her even more renowned husband, Mahatma Gandhi. I quote him: "To call woman the weaker sex is a libel. It is man's injustice to woman. If by strength is meant moral power, then woman is immeasurably man's superior. Is she not more self-sacrificing? Has she not greater powers of endurance? Has she not greater courage? Without her, man could not be. If non-violence is the law of our being, the future is with women." This, in a nutshell, encapsulates not only Gandhi's appreciation of Indian women, but more precisely exemplifies his deep and sincere appreciation of Kasturba, his wife, with whom he enjoyed an extraordinary marital union of 62 years, and from whose exemplary conduct he learned and experienced the fundamental truth about the great moral strength of Indian womanhood, and realized the nodal role women could play in the Indian freedom struggle. For Kasturba was with him throughout, endowing him with moral support and crucial self-assurance, right from the revolutionary protests in South Africa to the nationwide campaigns in India. And despite ill health, she endured draconian imprisonments and went on fasts to oppose injustice. From Kasturba, who, by the way, was 6 months older than Mohan, being born on the 11th of April, 1869, the young Mohandas learned at first hand the real meaning of nonviolence and satyagraha, or the insistence on truth, which served him as a revolutionary weapon of nonviolent resistance. Truly, Kasturba's life confirms the saying, behind every strong man, there is an even stronger woman. But she had an incomparable way of gently and in a dignified manner asserting her authority. Yet, as the embodiment of simplicity and compassion, she has unfortunately remained in the shadow of her iconic husband. Indeed, it is only recently that Kasturba, as one of the foremost women in the Indian freedom struggle, has attracted the attention of a few biographers, first and foremost by her grandson, Arun Gandhi, then by Giriraj Kishore, Nilima Dalmia Adar, and B.M. Bhalla, just to name the most prominent authors. Besides, there is a good Wikipedia article on her. Nationally, too, she is honoured in various significant ways. Firstly, the Kasturba Gandhi National Memorial Trust Fund for supporting women and children in rural India was set up in her memory by Gandhi himself. Many institutions, roads, hospitals, and schools are named after her. Narayan Desai, the son of Gandhi's secretary, Mahadev Desai, wrote a play, Kasturba, based on her life. Indian postal stamps have been released with her portrait, firstly to mark the birth centenary of the nation's first couple in 1969, then on her 20th death anniversary in 1964. And for the 150th birth anniversary, the Gandhi Research Foundation, with which I am associated, the Gandhi Research Foundation has inaugurated a rural sustainability project called Babaku 150. For more details, please consult our website at www.gandhifoundation.net. That's a bit of publicity for my own institution. And it's only right that we should mention Ba before Bapu, both well-known terms of affection for Kasturba and the Mahatma, given that it was Kasturba who played such a definitive role in the evolution of Mohandas into Mahatma Gandhi. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Professor Dharmpal. It was very nice to know of the role that Kasturba Gandhi played. And we're also thankful for your great knowledge that you have of the Gandhi family and their contribution. I would now request Jagjit, Jags, if you can tell us about Sarojini Naidu, another leading figure in India's freedom struggle, and how she was so actively involved in social welfare and other activities.
Yeah. It is an honor for me to participate in this Women's Day program. My thanks go to the Consul General Dr. Amit Tilang and to Mrs. Ruby Jaspreet for inviting me. Gender equality has been one of the most debated topics in the past decade. Though most of us agree that women deserve equal rights and opportunities as men, yet there are many challenges that a woman has to face regularly. If we look back into history, we will see that the contribution of women in India in the field of science, politics, sports, and business has been as worthy as men, but somehow their contributions are not much talked about here in Germany. Way back in 1917, Sarojini Naidu the Indian activist and poet, formed the Women's Indian Association with Annie Besant to seek equal rights for women to vote, and presented the need to include more women in Congress and the freedom struggle. From the time of Sarojini Naidu till today, women in India have overcome many odds and challenges. As the world moves toward Indian women are today in leading positions. Just to mention a few. Chanda Kochar is currently the CEO and MD of ICICI Bank. Paranjit Khurana is a scientist in the field of plant biotechnology. In politics, the present Modi government has got 6 women ministers. The previous government of Mr. Manmohan Singh had only 2. In 2018, Hima Das was the first Indian athlete to win gold at the IAAF World Athletics Championship. There are also Indian women who have been successful in leading positions in foreign countries. For example, Indira Nooyi, a former CEO at PepsiCo. No doubt, in any society, there are challenging issues for women. But the outstanding women in India are today beacons for the others. So it has been a great pleasure to be able to have shared my views with you. Remain well and safe. Thank you and namaste.
Thank you. Thank you, Jags. And as you're very rightly pointing out, what started with our leaders, women leaders like Sarojini Naidu, like Kasturba Gandhi, it is something which is continuing, and that spark, that fire in Indian women continues to remain. Therefore, we have examples that you quoted, like Indira Nooyi and others. So thank you for bringing that out, Jags. So, which also takes me to another aspect, because we've had women leaders who were fighting peacefully, but there were also women revolutionaries. So Manjari, if you can, go further back in history and talk of Rani Lakshmi Bai. She was the firebrand queen of Jhansi, continues to be an inspiration today, Manjari. So can you please elaborate on that?
I take this opportunity to wish all the women a very happy Women's Day. Stay healthy, take choices you want to take, and lead a life like Rani Lakshmi Bai, who has always been a motivation in field of courage and bravery. She has been an embodiment of courage and bravery, the queen who fiercely fought for the independence of her land and her people. Born in 1835, she was brought up in the household of Peshwas, the ruler Bajirao II. She had an unusual upbringing for a Brahmin girl. Growing up with the boys at the Peshwa court, she was trained in martial arts and became expert in sword fighting and horse riding. She was married to Maharaja of Jhansi, Gangadhar Rao, but was widowed without bearing a surviving heir to the throne. Following the established Hindu tradition of those times, just before his death, Maharaja adopted a boy as his heir. Lord Dalhousie, the British Governor General of India, refused to recognize the adopted heir and annexed Jhansi in accordance with the doctrine of lapse. An agent of East India Company was posted in the small kingdom to look after the administrative matters. The 22-year-old queen refused to cede Jhansi. Meri Jhansi nahi dungi. That was her spirit. She fought the War of Mutiny in 1857 and died death of a hero. She has always been an embodiment of courage and bravery, and we remember her today for the same. Thank you.
Thanks a lot, Manjari. You very rightly brought out how Rani Lakshmi Bai is somebody, we need to take an example from in our daily lives as well. And as you're saying that we need to take the choices we need to take. So I think that is really her spirit, which we do already embody in our daily lives. Malti, may I request you to come in now? You're joining us virtually from India, Malti. So I'd like you to speak a little bit about Madam Mikaji Kama, because not only for her role as a revolutionary, but because of the extensive social work also that she did. So how she was also a part of a reform movement. Malti, if we can focus on that as well, please.
Yes.
Okay, so a very good morning to all the lovely ladies out there. I'm very happy and feel honored to be part of this initiative as we are talking about the freedom struggles, the achievements of Indian women leaders in history. And I'm very thankful to Ruby Jasprit for reaching out to me, and also thank the Consul General for this wonderful opportunity. Behold, the flag of independent India is born. It has been made sacred by the blood of young Indians who sacrificed their lives in its honor. In the name of this flag, I appeal to lovers of freedom all over the world to support this struggle. Thundered Madam Bikaji Kama, a very fiery freedom fighter who was born in 1861 in Mumbai to a well-off Parsi family. She later married Rustam Kama in 1865, a wealthy pro-British lawyer. Though Madam Kama studied in an Alexandra British school, she was very opposed to the ways of the oppression that she saw around her in Mumbai and in other places of India. So she started at a very young age to fight for the freedom of India. And her role in the Indian freedom struggle will live very long in our histories. She also added, "This is the flag of independent India. I appeal to all the gentlemen to stand and salute the flag." And this was the first time the Indian tricolor was hurled on a foreign soil. She did that when she addressed many men, and I'm not sure if there were women, at a conference, at an international socialist conference in Stuttgart in the year 1902 or 1907, I'm not sure. To just tell you about how brave a woman she was, at the conference when someone made a comment about India not even having a flag, let alone talk about freedom, she tore off her sari, stitched a flag out of it and displayed it at the conference. And she very boldly called this the Indian flag of independence. And it was based on a design by Veer Savarkar. The design and color of this flag was adopted back in India as the Vande Mataram flag. And this flag that she raised was then brought to India by Indulal Yagnik, and it is now displayed in the Maratha and Kesari Library in Pune. Now, a little bit about how she grew up. I told you that she was also a very, in addition to the freedom struggles, she was also very actively involved in social work. When a plague attacked Mumbai, she quickly jumped in to help the people around and eventually got herself infected. She was receiving treatment in Mumbai, but she started becoming very weak, and she was advised to go to London for better treatment in 1902. There she met Shyamji Krishnan Varmaji and Dadabhai Nauroji at London. And after working with them for a few years, she moved to Paris, where she founded the Paris Indian Society along with Ranaji and Mushar Shah Gurjorji Godrej. She traveled across and gave several lectures and speeches, and all the while she was asking and seeking help from the Indian diaspora and the support, and her popularity grew in Europe. And she joined hands with a lot of intellectuals who were supporting India's freedom struggle. She also traveled to the US to seek support for India's independence. During the World War I, when UK and France became friends, she went into Marseille, and then later when the war ended, she went over home in Paris. And during this time, she was constantly playing her role in the freedom struggle by printing and publishing Veer Savarkar's book, The First Year of Independence, which was banned in India, and also the other magazine called Vande Mataram, which was also banned in India. But she somehow find a way to bring it to India and distribute it to the editors and the people who had fight for India's freedom. So this she was working very hard to keep the fire of burning in the hearts of Indians, not only in foreign soil where she was, in Europe and the US, but also Indian soil. So after relocating to Paris, there was a conspiracy by British to kill her, and she became very ill because of a stroke which she previously suffered, and it came back to attack her when she was almost 70 years of age. So she finally decided to return to Bombay. But she was not allowed to return to India by the British, because she would kind of stir the freedom struggle there very fiercely. So finally, she had to do an undertaking. She would not get involved in any of the freedom struggles when she returned to India. She was allowed to travel, only to pass away on the 13th of August in 1936 at the age of 73. She was also very actively involved in women empowerment. According to her, independence and nation building were considered a priority. She's apparently she apparently said, the hand that rocks the cradle is also capable of building a nation. So I think as then we also have to take this to heart and ensure that we build a nation that we have come a long way, but we still have a long way to go. And that is the story of a brave woman who fought for the freedom of India, sitting in olive and foreign soil more than 30 years. The government has released a stamp in her name, and they have named several streets and roads in her name. For example, the street Delhi named Bikaji Kama Place, and there are first patrol vessel that has been named after her. So this has been a very interesting learning for me also, to learn about various freedom fighters, and the list is very long. And I'm very happy that we are all able to share a few of the stories with you all. Thank you so much for having me here, and once again, I wish you all a very happy Women's Day.
Thank you. Thank you, Marti, and also thank you for pointing out the Germany connection that Madam Bikaji Kama had, which is not a very well-known fact, but as you said, she did hoist the Indian flag on foreign soil for the first time, which happened at a conference in Stuttgart in Germany in the year 1907. So thank you for bringing that out. And talking of brave women brings me to Captain Lakshmi Segal, which I would request Richa Ambekar if you could bring out her role as well, please.
Sure. Thank you so much for inviting me today to this great panel, and I also wish you all today a very happy Women's Day. When I thought about, as we hear, something that I want to highlight today is how diverse even the fields of these contributors, women contributors to India has been. And one name, we heard about the non-violent line of thought of freedom fighters and contributors. This is the name Captain Dr. Lakshmi Segal is a name from the other line of thought that we had, where she believed in, she was a rebel, a revolutionist, and they believed in the armed revolution of freedom struggle. And so I will just highlight there is a lot of literature. Fortunately, we are privileged that she was blessed with a long life, and there is a lot one can research. I thought about bringing out some of the probably lesser known facts and sum it up, and also thought about how she influences my generation or even the younger generation in terms of global diversity that we are talking about, or gender and gender mainstreaming. So just a couple of facts. When you read about her, the bravery of Captain Dr. Lakshmi Segal is just, you cannot fathom it. She was MBBS, so she did her doctorate from Chennai. She was born in Kerala as Lakshmi Swaminathan. Her father was a lawyer, and mother was also an iconic figure at the time. So as all of us can imagine, she grew up in this framework of activism and being a revolutionist with all these values. The tipping point, and this is what I find extremely inspiring, is she was a doctor. So here was a young, beautiful, privileged doctor who could have chosen a path of comfort, but where the Britishers summoned all the doctors. The war started, and all the doctors from all over the country were summoned to work for the Britishers, where she said, I will not do that. And that was a tipping point where she said, I will not work for the British Raj, and I will then contribute in a concrete manner to, to our armed revolution of freedom struggle. So she, at the time, she traveled to Singapore, and she also aided the prisoners of wars in Singapore. And that is where, another great leader of our freedom struggle, Netaji Subhash Chandra Bose, at the time was forming the INA, the Indian National Army, where the Rani Jhansi regiment was being formed. Again, a very how different it is from the equality point of view, how different or a unique way, the perspective India at the time also gave the entire discussion of not having men and women's regiment separately, but they were formed equally. So that is, again, for us, for this generation, for us, our Indian contribution to the equality, something that is very original. I want to highlight another fact. So coming back to her contribution, Dr. Lakshmi Segal became Captain Lakshmi Segal because she was heading the Rani Jhansi regiment under the influence of Netaji Subhash Chandra Bose and many other leaders. So what she did was she traveled through India recruiting different women in this force. Very important, and again a very interesting fact where the bravery of these women are just unfathomable is, at the time, during the war, there were many countries where there were women regiments also. The difference is, Rani Jhansi regiment was no different. The other countries had women forces as auxiliary forces. So they would be like a backup. They would not go to the front fighting shoulder to shoulder. They were treated as the second class and treated as backup forces, not the Rani Jhansi regiment. That is something I find is absolute bravery of the highest regard that one can have. So Rani Jhansi regiment was led by Captain Lakshmi Segal, and they had the same training, they had the same the tasks that even the men-led regiments had. Another big contribution, so even after achieving freedom, Dr. Lakshmi Segal did not did not go back to her comfort zone, but she contributed a lot to women's health, awareness of women's health, different crises that the nation was going through at the time, the Bengal crisis, and also to women's empowerment in general. So here's another name in the long list, as you all said, who embodies a lot of original thought, who was a doctor, who was a captain, who led an army, who traveled not just the Asian countries but also our own country, and that is the heritage that we all have. Thank you so much.
No, thanks, Richa. And as you were pointing out about there not being separate regiments for men and women, and not treating women as an auxiliary force but as an equal force, that's where I want to bring in Professor Dharumpal. If you can come in and elaborate on what Richa is very rightly pointing out, that this was not so much about just political freedom but also about social economic freedom, about really treating women equally. And do you think that over these last 75 years, we've moved closer to that goal? We have achieved this sort of freedom? Professor Dharpal, if you can come in and elaborate there.
Yes, thank you. I've been very interested listening to all my co-women panelists. There's so much to say about our freedom fighters, but it's certainly very true that Indian women came on center stage in the Indian freedom struggle, facilitated by Gandhi, for he realized their crucial significance to the success of the movement for Swaraj or independence. But let me explain his facilitating role, as elucidated so precisely by Madhu Kishwar, a prominent Indian spokeswoman, and I quote her: Gandhi saw women not as objects of reform, but as self-conscious subjects who could, if they choose, become arbiters of their own destiny. In this way, Gandhi represents a crucial break from the attitude of many of the leaders of the reform movements of the late 19th century. And the main contribution of Gandhi to the cause of women lay in his absolute and unequivocal insistence on their personal dignity and autonomy in the family and society. And this, I wanted to bring up this quote because it brings out the emphasis on the dignity and autonomy of women in the family and society. And moreover, I would say that empowerment, rather than mere freedom or independence, is what Gandhi wanted Indian women to achieve. So I think we should perhaps talk about empowerment rather than freedom. And to this end, gender equality was held to be sacrosanct and became enshrined in the Constitution. This entailed the abolition of practices such as child marriages and dowry, but also the right to marital separation, having equal rights over children, all of which have received legal sanction in independent India. In daily matters, Gandhi insisted on the sharing of household chores between husband and wife, the appreciation of the birth of both a male and a female child, and the prohibition of female feticide. That, in reality, there are unfortunately many discrepancies, does not reduce the significance of these aspirations that were strengthened by the setting up of a separate Ministry of Women and Child Development. In independent India, taking a cue from the freedom movement and being inspired and empowered by the Satyagraha campaigns, there have been several protest movements initiated primarily by women on a number of issues around diverse subjects such as land rights, wages, security of employment, equality, etc. But let me mention the most prominent initiatives. The formation, for instance, by Ella Bhatt in 1972 of the Self-Employed Women's Association, short form is SEVA, was probably the first attempt made to form a women's trade union with its headquarters in Ahmedabad. Then, in the Himalayan foothills, the famous Chipko movement, a forest conservation movement started by hill women in 1973 in Uttarakhand, went on to become a rallying point for many future environmental movements all over the world. My third and last example is the Anti-Arak Movement, initiated in the late 1980s and early 1990s in Andhra Pradesh, which was a mass uprising of women against the production and sale of country liquor or arak, to mitigate the economic destitution and physical violence women had been suffering at the hands of their drunkard husbands. The impact of this women's movement led to the total prohibition of the production of illicit liquor in the state, and had far-reaching repercussions in other states as well. Women's organizations and self-help groups continue these and other initiatives on a pan-Indian scale, whereby social and economic empowerment remains an ongoing dynamic endeavor. Thank you.
Yes, thanks, Professor Dharmpal. I think you're right, and very good examples you've given to really showcase how our freedom struggle also gradually rooted into, stemmed into different forms of reforms that we wanted to bring. And in fact, a very important angle of this was also our universal adult suffrage, our right to vote, which was extended to women. That's where I'd like Malati to also come in and tell us, Malati, what is your assessment of how successful has our freedom struggle been in empowering women? And as Professor Dharpal was saying, that this is no longer about freedom, now we're talking about empowerment of women. And where do you think, I mean, because of universal adult suffrage and other political liberties we've got, how is the situation now? What is your assessment, Malti?
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, that's a nice question, Ruby. I feel the adoption of the universal suffrage was very bold, decisive, and revolutionary for the time period. And it also makes me feel very proud to know that India was the first to grant universal suffrage right from the start, without any discrimination, to all of her adult citizens. You know, the right to vote, as we call it, is not what is mentioned in the Constitution. In fact, India gives every citizen, whoever is, sound in their mind, the possibility to enroll in the electorate. And this is a big step because according to the Article 325 and 326 of the Indian Constitution, it aids in developing a mindset, breaking the traditional clutches of caste, social and economic class, race, religion, gender, literacy, landholding, etc. In fact, the Indian Constitution gives every citizen of India also the possibility to contest in any election, irrespective of his or her social background. Now, what is very interesting for me to find about the universal suffrage is that it expanded the electorate from 10% at that point of time to a full 100%. And another interesting point to note was that women were not allowed to vote in many of the states that we know. States by states, I mean many of the countries across the globe. But India gave the women the right to vote, gave the entitlement to vote right from the day the constitution was put in place. And the women's entitlement to vote was earlier dependent on the status of their husband, and this was totally removed by adopting the universal suffrage. Now, though we had women who fought with true spirit and courage, undaunted by various tortures or exploitations and hardships, they still fought with dedication and devotion to see a free India. The list of freedom fighters who did that, the women freedom fighters, is very long. And from then to now, we see a constant increase of women's participation in various fields. And this is primarily due to the strength and determination of various women's movements across India, as well as the government policies that aid women today to participate in many sectors like politics or sports or sciences, in economic policies like in business or medicine. I mean, it's like you name it and we have it. But I think one of the notable, couple of notable things that I remember is that we have these two famous women scientists who created history by heading the Chandrayaan mission from the ISRO. And today we also have the women commanders overcoming the glass ceiling to become, to join the armed forces, to become nurses or doctors or engineers or signalers or, fighter pilots also. We have women commandos. I think we should feel very proud of that fact. And the participation of women in the political scenario is also on the rise. And this shows, not only standing as political candidates, but also in the rural areas, we see that a lot more women are now casting their vote in all these elections. And this shows self-empowerment. But I think we still need a very strong womenomics policy and plan to ensure that women are equally empowered, be it a rural, a semi-urban, or an urban area. By having this, I think we will have a reduction in the urban-rural divide, and this would ensure that women in the rural areas also enjoy the same benefits of, let's say, economy, healthcare, decision-making power, education, to name a few. And also, this policy could ensure that we don't have any gender disparity or even a pay disparity, and also the legal system also, there are a lot of gaps between the laws, policies, and the practices. For example, we could take the Nirbhaya case. We saw that the verdict came after 7 years. So while we see self-empowerment in some cases, but I think we also need to have a very inclusive policies everywhere, all around, to ensure that Indian women are truly empowered
Yeah.
in all aspects of life. Thank you.
No, you're right, Malati, and you're also right in pointing out how our political freedoms have influenced, I would say, even all of us in our personal capacities. So many of us sitting here have also had our set of challenges, and some of us have switched countries. So, for example, Manjari, you've been here 30 years now, and I know it wouldn't have been an easy decision or a journey to, shift base from India, move to a foreign country, and establish yourself here. Can you share about your experience, Manjari? How has your journey been?
Yeah, the initial times were tough, definitely. Language was the first barrier because without the language there
Yeah.
was no communication, no understanding.
Yeah.
So the first step that we took was to attend classes to learn, and everywhere that was kind of a barrier. You go shopping, groceries, or even to talk with the teachers of your child.
Yeah.
That took a while to overcome. Then another important thing was the food. One leaves all our culinary tastes, we bring them with, and we don't get all that stuff. Those 30 years ago, we did not get all that. So these were slowly, and then of course living without the family, living far away from friends and domestic help. That was again another major tough thing to handle. But I find the German people are very friendly. They appreciate when you start learning their language. We found really good German friends who helped us through. And now we are happy to be a part of this society.
Yes. No, you're right, Manjari, and I think as women in general, we are very resilient. So when it comes to moving places, like Jags here has also been an example. She came here when she was very young. I'm sure, Jags, you would have had your challenges, and now you've established yourself here. You're so active here. Would you like to share something on your journey as well?
Well, my journey started very early in the 70s, where there were not many Indians in Germany when I came. I was married to a German, and I had learned the language already in India at the Max Müller in Delhi during my university studies and at the Goethe Institute in Pune, and had actively taken part in all the cultural activities in India that Goethe Institute offered. But strangely enough, when I came here, all that learned German was gone because speaking and learning were two pairs of shoes. I have to say that I started teaching already in Germany, in Tübingen, down south. My children were born there. And today, after 50 years of having been in Germany, I'm very happy. This is my second home. And I have two, let's say, homes, India and Germany, and I'm very blessed to be able to experience them.
Thanks, Jax. Thanks. It's very lovely listening to your experiences, those who've been here for very long. We also have Rucha, who's the face of the young Indian women who are successful here, who've established themselves here. Rucha, what is your take on Indian women in general on a global scenario who are doing very well in the corporate sector, in science and engineering, of which, somebody of your age, and how you've also had your success story here. So you are a reflection of that sort of strength that Indian women have. So what is your experience on the achievements we've had in 75 years?
I would like to again highlight what your generation paved the way for us right now in Germany especially, but also on the global scale also, where we now do not have to fight with the same elements what you had, or difficulties that you have had. The challenges have probably changed, but it is definitely not how it was in the 70s or in the 80s, with the perception of Indians or people coming from India in Germany, with the work that our diplomatic missions do, have changed tremendously. I don't want to get into much of, we all know, we talked about how Indian women are achieving on a global scale what all names are visible. There are also many names who are not visible, who are not big names, but still are changing the status quo, and in Germany and also globally in their own way. What I definitely see in intercultural field, we talk about culture as an iceberg, and the tip of the iceberg is what you see or communicate with and so on, and under the water surface, all that which is relevant, which is our heritage, the women contributors that we talked about, the values that are given to generations, and how we are related to those values. So that is something that is different or unique to the women folk coming from India, and representing that original thought now also in Germany with a very clear voice, where you say the equality has come to that, the discussion of equality has come to that level where you don't have to follow the same discussions as the West did, but we have our own. And so that is something I find new in my generation, where we say we have our own arguments, we have our own points, which is a continuation of all that we talked about, and how inherently pluralistic our society has been, which again highlights a little the difference or the originality in the thought, where we talked about also Captain Lakshmi Segal, who was brave but also compassionate, or Rani Jhansi Lakshmi Bai, who took care of her son but also fought, and so on and so forth. So, and so many, the non-violence, but also being resilient. So that is something that is a heritage or values that we bring out now, our generation and the generation that comes, in a diversity discussion which is going on internationally. As Malati pointed out, we are not debating the equality internationally or women empowerment, but saying what our contribution now it is. So we have come a long way. I always think, even in Germany very particularly, I set up my own business, and I'm active, and many of my partners are German companies or from Germany. I do feel that it is now a sort of a new discussion, where equality has or women empowerment has gone to another level, and we as women representing all this have absolutely an original thought to take to the table and to the discussion, which also gets a lot of appreciation, a lot of attention. So that is how we will continue, I think, to sum up the question.
Yeah. No, you're right, Rucha, and also rightly pointing out that it is from one generation to another that our lives have been made easier, and we have been empowered over a period of 75 years.
Yeah.
And this is where we find ourselves today. So that's very rightly pointed out. As we draw to the conclusion of our discussion, I would like to bring in again Professor Geeta Dharampal. If you could give your concluding remarks, and also tell us, Professor Dharampal, that after listening to all of us, after hearing different stories, hearing on different avenues where Indian women have started asserting themselves, do you think that we are today truly independent? Would you agree that we can call ourselves independent, or do you think that there is still more that needs to be done? If you could please sum up our discussion today, Professor Dharampal.
Yeah. It was wonderful listening to all of you, despite my rather unstable connection. But I think looking at India in the global scenario is good, but India is also very specific. And to understand what the situation is in India at present, I think one has to try and understand the dynamics of the Indian freedom struggle. When thousands rallied to Gandhi's call for Swaraj and civil disobedience, women set aside their traditional roles. They came out of seclusion. They became free. They cast off their purdah. They entered the public domain along with men and offered sympathy. They remained undaunted by police beatings and extreme hardships in prison. Even illiterate tribal women from the forests joined with freedom movement. So this was really true empowerment. But on attaining political independence, Gandhi intended that the masses, male and female, should become empowered, so that people's power at the grassroots in India's 700,000 villages their power could be exercised. But since the centralized colonial structures were more or less maintained they were kept in place in Peruvian India, people's democracy could not be fully realized. And although gender equality and women's rights were enshrined in the Constitution, this remained more or less a formal proclamation, which, however, in the last 7.5 decades, has served as an ideational basis for several efforts at national, state, community, and family level. But in line with what I've previously said, there have been several initiatives exemplifying or bringing about women's empowerment. And I consider the term empowerment more appropriate than independence for empowered women, not necessarily asserting their own personal independence vis-a-vis men. These empowered women work towards the further empowerment of society together with men, rather than in confrontation. And I think this is important to remember this for the Indian context. It should be mentioned that in recent years, the government has increased the economic empowerment of women by setting up Jan Dhan accounts, special accounts, bank accounts, to ensure, especially for rural women, access to financial services. Also giving them soft loans under another scheme. Another more inclusive and far-reaching initiative has been the Beti Bachao, Beti Padhao initiative, namely facilitating education for girls, which is a source of real empowerment. In particular, one pan-Indian scheme such as the Swachh Bharat Abhiyan, Clean India movement, has greatly benefited the lives of women by providing improved sanitation, hygiene, and health, and as a consequence has contributed to their empowerment. And the more recent initiative of Atmanirbhar Bharat, self-reliant India, can only be successful if it is accompanied by women's empowerment. For empowered women would be a driving force in bringing about self-reliance, especially at the grassroots community level. In short, the answer to the million-dollar question, what more needs to be done, would be, if you will permit, a Gandhian one. Namely, that we orient our focus towards empowering communities comprising all genders, be they rural or urban, enabling them, with women often taking the lead in making decisions about their economic, social, and cultural welfare more comprehensively and in a more egalitarian manner. I think these would be my concluding words. In the Gandhian spirit, since I'm speaking from a Gandhian research institution, I'm being true to the cause. And I think that this is perhaps the way to go about having an egalitarian society. In India, it may not be the answer to for global solutions, but I think Indian case is certainly special, and Indian women have a lot to contribute. And they're doing this every day, every hour or minute of the day, in their own very special ways. And so I wish all Indian women, all women who are listening to this very special program, a very happy Women's Day.
Thank you, Professor Dharampal, for summing it up so well and bringing in all the points that we've discussed so far. And you've talked about our economic empowerment, political empowerment. You've also brought in sanitation and the other initiatives that the government of India is taking, and also how for Atmanirbhar Bharat it is very rightly, as you said, crucial that women are involved. And we totally agree it is at a community level that this has to begin. So thank you for bringing this all out and also for summing up our very useful discussion today, wherein we've covered the journey of Indian women over the 75 years of our independence. And very thanks to each of our panelists, Professor Dharanpal to you, Malati to you for joining us from India. Manjari, Jags, Jagjit, and Rucha. Thank you everyone for joining and bringing your own story to the table, your own perspectives to the table. I wish everybody a very happy International Women's Day, and we hope everyone stays safe, stays empowered, and stays successful. Yes, thank you. Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah.